Do you ever feel like using GPT or Claude almost feels like using a slot machine? You never know what you're going to get. You type in a prompt, you hit enter, hope it works, hope it's not complete and utter trash. Well, here's the thing. That's not a bug. That's literally the point. You see, AI doesn't work like the technologies that we grew up with. AI is a probabilistic system, not a deterministic one. And if you don't know what that is, no worries. We're going to cover that in a moment because it's so important to have a deeper understanding for how these technologies work under the hood. Once you're able to get a good grasp on what makes this system probabilistic versus the deterministic ones that we have been used to in technology, you will for sure become much better at using these technologies and a hell of a lot less frustrated. So in this video, we are going to explore just that. We're going to talk about what makes AI so different than the technologies that we've been used to. We're also going to do a fun little demo to bring the concept home. And finally, we'll talk through some strategies on how to make the best use of AI for your use case. Ultimately, my goal here is to make AI feel a lot less random. Let's get started. All right, so here is what we are going to be covering today. First, we are going to break down what deterministic versus probabilistic actually means and why this shift changes everything about how you build with AI. Second, we will run a live demo to make these concepts a bit more crystal clear. And third, we'll talk strategy. When do you want more chaos? When do you need to lock it down? And how do you actually control the outputs you get? And finally, we'll look at how real products use both probabilistic for creativity and deterministic for reliability. This is where theory becomes something you can actually ship. Let's get into it. Now, if you don't know me, my name is Sunny. I'm a serial entrepreneur now on my fourth startup, a former senior engineer at Bloomberg and Shopify, and currently an adjunct professor at Columbia Business School where I teach technology. Listen, I have been building software for over 15 years, well before AI, and I have made all the mistakes so you don't have to. What I'm aiming to do today, and honestly in all my videos, is to help you actually get your idea out into the world. Let's get started with our first step. I'll start with this. The reason why AI feels so different is because every technology that we've grown up with has been completely different. They were all deterministic, which is just a fancy word for 100% predictable. Think about a calculator. Every time you type 2 plus 2, you get 4. Every single time. No surprises. It follows rules. Input to rules to output. That's it. Your email app, deterministic. Click send, it sends. Your Spotify playlist, deterministic. Hit play, it plays the next song in the queue. Now, of course, sometimes things don't always stick to the script. But when things veer off course, we would consider that to be unintended behavior, or simply a bug. Because ultimately, these systems are designed to not guess anything. They're just following very concrete rules. Now, AI, a completely different animal, because AI is probabilistic, which means it's not following any rules. It's actually just making predictions. So when you ask GPT to write something, it's not actually looking up the correct answer in some database. It's actually predicting the next most likely word, then the next one, then the next one, based on patterns it learned from billions of examples. Now, what I'm about to tell you is a super simplistic metaphor, but it does generally apply. But you could think of AI as simply autocomplete on steroids. So I want to give you this visual. So here we have an example of a potential AI model determining what is the next word after this initial part of the sentence. The cat sat on the. So in this example, our AI model is determining how to complete the sentence. Each outcome has a probability score. Matt has 40%, floor has 25%, couch has 20%, so on and so forth. So the same prompt can actually give you different outputs because you're literally sampling from a probability curve. You're rolling the dice over and over and over again, sometimes thousands of times, tens of thousands of times per response. And here's why AI sometimes feels brilliant and sometimes feels completely unhinged. It's not broken. It's not hallucinating in the way you think it is. It's just doing what it was designed to do. Predict what comes next based on probabilities, not facts. And the reason it feels so jarring when it gets something wrong is because it actually sounds correct. It sounds natural because that's what it's optimized for. Generating streams of words that flow together like human thought. Streams of words that sound very realistic based off patterns it has learned across the information it was trained on. So when AI tells you that Abraham Lincoln invented the telephone, it doesn't stutter. It doesn't hesitate. It just says it with the same fluent confidence it uses to tell you the actual correct answer. And that's the most important point here. It's not trying to lie to you. It's just really, really good at sounding right, even when it's completely making things up. And by the way, Abraham Lincoln did not invent the telephone. All right, so let's actually demonstrate this a little bit more. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a very simple prompt, maybe a very open-ended prompt, and run it 3 times in an isolated environment. So the isolated environment that we're going to use here is the temporary chat feature in ChatGPT. This is somewhat isolated. There is some additional context that I'm sure is here under the hood, but we're going to use this as a proxy for an isolated environment. So let's start with this version 1. So what I'm going to paste here is this. Give me a healthcare product idea in 5 lines or less. Let's see what we get back here. Okay, cool. Smart Wound Patch, a biodegradable AI-powered adhesive patch that monitors wound healing. Cool. That sounds interesting. Let's try another one. Okay, same prompt, a different isolated environment. So now we're getting a slightly different, we're getting a different product altogether. It's still a patch, but it tracks drug absorption through the skin, monitors vital signs, and syncs with a mobile app. So completely different product, similar category in terms of a patch, but different product. Okay, so let's do this a 3rd time. This time I'm going to go a different approach, and I'm actually going to use incognito and use an anonymous session and paste the same prompt here. Okay, so now we're getting a completely different product idea. Cool. Let me try one more time. Cool. So we're getting different product ideas. It's still very much in the wearable category, but it's still quite different. So now let's rerun this and actually give it a little bit more specificity here. So this time I'm going to give it a little bit more specifics. We're going to focus on medication management. Cool. So this is now, we're talking about a medication app. There's more specifics. Let's rerun this again. So now we're getting very similar outputs. We're going to rerun this one more time. So again, we're getting very similar outputs because we have basically given it more specifics and we're kind of constraining the realm of possible outcomes here. What we're really seeing is, while we're seeing some randomness, the outputs that we're actually getting are definitely more closely related. So now we're still seeing some randomness, but the outputs that we're getting are definitely more closely related. The ideas are still slightly different, but they're all kind of in the same zone. So now we're not gambling anymore. We're kind of guiding the system a little bit. And here's what most people miss about AI. These AI models, they're not totally random. They do follow some kind of probability distribution. So the more specific your prompt, the narrower that probability curve gets, and therefore the more control you have over the outputs. You're not just hoping for the right answer, you're constraining the system to give you one. Vague prompts, on the other hand, are going to give you more of that slot machine feel, and you'll get way more variety in your responses. Specific prompts will feel a little bit more like a vending machine, more clear, direct, a little bit more deterministic. One isn't necessarily superior than the other. It all depends on your use case. So that leads me to my next point. One could ask, well, why would you want our AI models to return such variable results? Why would we want this slot machine-like dynamic? So here are some cases where variability is actually good. Pretty much any time that you have a need for creativity. So one example is brainstorming and ideation. Maybe you're exploring different concepts and you want 10 different directions for a feature, or maybe 3 different angles for a marketing campaign. In these scenarios, variability is a strength. Another example is creative content. Maybe you're writing blog posts, generating social media captions. Maybe you're drafting an email. You want it to feel natural and human and not so robotic. So a little unpredictability keeps things fresh. In these cases, we want to see completely different things. We want to see variability so that it sparks that creativity. But of course, there are also cases where you need consistency, and actually variability could potentially be dangerous. So one scenario is when you're dealing with user-facing features. You don't necessarily always want your app to give different answers every time a user asks the same question. They'll likely think it's broken because consistency builds trust. Another scenario is where you're doing calculations or anything fact-based. If you're asking AI to do math or pull facts, you need determinism. Probabilistic guessing could bite you. And then, of course, there's some production systems where you really want to constrain creativity. Things like medical advice, financial tools, where you just can't afford wild swings. One bad output could tank your credibility or worse. But here's the trap I see a lot of people fall into. They treat AI like magic and let it run wild everywhere. And in many cases, that's not a good thing. The best builders know when to embrace randomness, and they also know when to constrain randomness. So if people are relying on your product, you can't just wing it. Variability is amazing for exploration, but it can really be bad in certain real-world scenarios. Okay, so what if you do want more variability? What if you're brainstorming and the ideas almost feel too predictable or even too safe? Here's a good approach on how to get some really high quality variable results in your prompts. Combine disciplines. So when you mash together 2 unrelated fields, you force the model into less common territory. The probability distribution shifts. You get weirder, more interesting ideas. Let me show you what I mean. All right, so let's start with a boring, maybe like super open-ended prompt. Okay, HealthSync, smart healthcare app unifies medical records. Okay, this is pretty standard. I'm sure there's probably hundreds of companies trying to do exactly this product right now. Now, let's go with something that's a little bit more interesting. All right, give me an app idea that combines healthcare and gaming. Okay, so let's see what we get. Health Quest, a mobile RPG where users level up their in-game avatar by completing real-world health tasks. Each quest improves both player stats and wellness metrics. Okay, this is cooler. That sounds way more interesting than what we just had before. Okay, now let's make it even more interesting. So here's the prompt I have. Give me an idea that combines elderly care, board games, and storytelling in max 5 lines. So we're just kind of mashing up completely random concepts together. Let's see what we get. Cool. Memo Match, a digital board game platform where elderly users play classic games like Ludo, Scrabble, or chess with a family or volunteers online. After each game, players unlock story cards, prompting short life stories or memories to share. That's a really cool app. That's an app that I would totally use and encourage seniors to use as well. So this is kind of what I'm talking about. See how this works? So we're not asking for creative ideas. You're kind of structuring the prompt to force creativity by pulling from multiple domains. And this is something super interesting that I've noticed. The best ideas live at the intersection of disciplines. Not because a model is suddenly better, but because you're actually guiding it into a probability space that most people never really explored. Everyone's prompting in the same kind of boring lane. Healthcare app, telemedicine. Fitness app, step tracker. And it's the same answers over and over and over again. But when you combine fields like psychology and architecture, or finance and gaming, or education and social media, you're steering the model off the beaten path. You're not hoping for originality, you're actually engineering it. That's how you turn randomness into rocket fuel. All right, but of course, we also covered many instances where we don't necessarily want such variability in our outputs. So how do we tighten the rein in these outputs from our AI models? This is where prompt engineering comes in. So prompt engineering is just a fancy term for being really good at writing prompts for AI. Now, if you want more specific and consistent outputs, then you will simply need to add more constraints, because when you narrow the probability curve that the AI model can work with, that results in more consistent outputs. Let me show you what I mean. Okay, so we're going to start with a super vague prompt. Write a product description for a fitness app. Let's see what we get. Okay, so it's just kind of a random product description. It's also kind of like assuming a whole bunch of features. So kind of random, not constrained, and most likely not going to be useful for a real world use case, because if we're asking for a product description, we'll likely have the actual fitness app in mind. So let's try something a little bit more specific. So write a 2-sentence product description for a fitness app in a motivational tone targeting busy professionals. So now we're adding more constraints. We're certainly constraining the number of sentences it can use, but we're also constraining the tone and indicating and adding some context as to who we're trying to target here. Cool. So this is definitely more constrained and more likely to be kind of what we're looking for. Now let's go for an even tighter prompt. Write a 2-sentence product description for a fitness app called QuickFit. Tone is motivational and energetic. Audience is busy professionals who struggle to find time to work. Focus on how the app delivers results in just 15 minutes a day. Okay, so now we're getting even more constrained outputs here. This is way clearer for what we need, and now that we've provided that context, we're just going to get a clearer, more constrained, more consistent output. Now, there are a lot of different ways you can constrain an output, and these are the different kind of prompt engineering levers that we can use. So certainly length, actually being very clear on how long you want the output to be. I've been in many situations, and I'm sure you have, where you've prompted something for a quick answer and these models are producing a very, very verbose, lengthy answer. So very, very important to have an idea of the length. The format, whether you want to use a numbered list or write in first person. The tone, professional, casual, or funny. Audience, who is the audience for? The structure, start with the question and answer. These are all the levers you can pull when structuring your prompt if you are looking for more consistent outputs, because the more specific you are, the less random the model is going to get. Now, here's what most people get wrong about prompt engineering. They think it's about finding that magic prompt that unlocks AI. But here's the deal. It's not magic. It is just constraints. Every time you add a specific detail like tone, length, format, audience, you're essentially cutting off those branches on that probability tree that we saw earlier. You're telling the model, don't go there, go here instead. Because the best prompt engineers are not whisperers, they are actually architects. They're designing the shape of the response before the model can even start generating. All right, but here's where things get interesting. The best products, they don't choose between probabilistic or deterministic. They actually use both. You know, you want AI to be creative and flexible where it helps the user, but you also want rules, you want structure, you want predictability where it actually matters. So let's walk through an example. Let's say you are building a budgeting app with AI insights. So the probabilistic part will be this. The AI will analyze your spending patterns and give you personalized advice. For example, you spent more on restaurants this month. Maybe try meal prepping. It can suggest ways to save that fit your lifestyle. It adapts to your habits. That's all probabilistic because we want new, fresh, creative ideas on how to save money. But the deterministic part is the math. The math needs to be locked down. Your account balance is calculated exactly. The spending, the projected savings, those need to be computed precisely. There's no creativity or probabilistic math when it comes to your money. You want the insights to be personalized and helpful, but you need the numbers to be precise and secure. See the pattern? AI handles the creative, flexible stuff. Rules handle the things that are very clearly black and white. And here's what separates good AI products from great ones. Knowing where to let the model run wild and where to lock it down. If everything in your app is probabilistic, your product feels unreliable. Now, if everything is deterministic, your product feels robotic and lifeless even. The magic happens, though, in the middle. Use AI for the parts where variety and creativity add value. Use rules and validation for the parts where consistency and correctness are non-negotiable. That's how you build something people trust and love. All right, we are now at the end. Here are two things I want you to take away from this video. First, AI feels like a slot machine because it is probabilistic. It's predicting what comes next based on probabilities, not facts. We saw it live in the demo that we did earlier. Same prompt, different outputs. Second, it's important to know when to embrace that chaos and when to kill it. And if you do want to embrace that chaos, combining disciplines can be a great strategy to do so. Look, here's what most people get wrong. They think AI is either magical or it's broken when the result you get feels off. But the truth is, it is neither. It's a probabilistic system that uses prediction as a way to get you a result. And once you accept that, everything changes. You start designing around that fact, and using these technologies will be a lot more pleasant. The people who do well with these technologies are not necessarily the ones who have the best prompts. They're the ones who understand the system and engineer around it. So here's what I want you to do. Pick one thing you're working on right now and ask yourself, do I need more variability or less? If you need more, combine two fields, two disciplines. Force the AI to go somewhere completely unexpected. Now, and if you need less, add constraints. Be specific, lock it down. AI stops feeling like gambling the moment you understand how it works. You're not hoping for good outputs, you are engineering them. That's the difference between playing slots and building products. Now, if you stayed with me till the end, I appreciate you. I will see you on the next video. Thank you.